The bustling city streets were coming alive with the aroma of fresh food as the sun rose on a new day. Inside a humble diner, a black chef named Amara stirred her signature gumbo, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Outside, Officer Bradley Cole, a cop known for his disdainful attitude, was on patrol. When their paths crossed, sparks flew in the worst way possible. Amara's dreams, her passion for food, and her dignity came under fire in a confrontation that no one could have predicted. But what Officer Cole didn't realize was that he'd soon come face to face with karma in a way that would leave him speechless. Why would a police officer humiliate a chef in front of others? What could make him regret his actions so deeply? And how could the love of cooking and a powerful twist change both their lives? Keep watching, because this is a story of resilience, justice, and an unforgettable moment of redemption that will inspire you. This story dives into Amara's world, the challenges she's overcome, and the moment that turns her pain into triumph. Stay tuned to discover how the smallest acts of kindness can ripple out and bring justice, even when all seems lost. What does karma have in store for this officer? Let's find out together. Amara was no stranger to hard work. The youngest of 4 children, she grew up in a small southern town where family dinners were sacred. Her mother, a talented cook, taught Amara everything she knew about blending spices, preparing hearty meals, and the love that went into creating food for others. Amara's mother used to say, "A good meal can heal the soul, baby." And Amara took those words to heart. After losing her mother at a young age, Amara vowed to carry on her legacy. With her sights set on becoming a top chef, she worked tirelessly, juggling long hours in culinary school and a side job at a local diner. It wasn't easy, but she never gave up. Her dream was to own a restaurant, a place where people from all walks of life could come together and enjoy a meal filled with warmth and love. Life in the city wasn't as kind as she had hoped. Despite her talent and passion, Amara faced constant discrimination and microaggressions. Many doubted her skills simply because of her skin color. Yet, she kept her head high, knowing that every challenge she faced would make her stronger. The small diner where Amara worked was more than just a job. It was her sanctuary. Known for her rich gumbo and melt-in-your-mouth cornbread, she had built a loyal customer base who loved her food and her infectious smile. But it wasn't just the food that drew people in. It was Amara herself. She had a way of making everyone feel welcome, no matter who they were. One day, while preparing her signature dish in the back kitchen, the sound of harsh voices broke through her peaceful routine. Amara peeked out to see what the commotion was about, and her heart sank. Officer Bradley Cole had just walked into the diner, his intimidating presence sucking the warmth out of the room. Known for his harsh treatment of minorities, Cole had a reputation that preceded him. Amara went back to her station, trying to focus on her cooking, but her heart pounded. She'd heard stories about Cole's behavior, and a part of her feared what might happen next. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she stirred the pot of gumbo. She tried to focus on the rich aroma of the spices, a scent that usually calmed her, but today was different. The air felt thick with tension. She could hear Officer Cole's booming voice as he barked orders at one of the waitresses. The diner had grown eerily silent. Customers who had been chatting minutes before now sat stiffly, their eyes darting between their plates and the officer. Cole leaned against the counter, his imposing figure blocking the view of anyone who might try to leave unnoticed. "What's taking so long back there?" he growled, glaring toward the kitchen. Amara sighed and wiped her hands on her apron. She wasn't about to let fear ruin her work. This gumbo was for a private catering order, one she hoped could open doors to bigger opportunities. If she nailed this job, it could be the break she needed. She carefully ladled the stew into a container, each scoop a reminder of her mother's lessons. Just as she finished, Cole's heavy boots clomped into the kitchen. The space, small and filled with the warmth of simmering food, suddenly felt cold. Amara turned to find him glaring at her. "I don't think you're allowed back here, officer," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Don't get smart with me," Cole snapped, stepping closer. His eyes narrowed as he scanned her face, her hands, and then the food she had prepared. "What's all this? Looks fancy for a place like this." Amara bristled at his words, but refused to let her temper flare. "It's for a catering order," she said calmly, hoping he'd lose interest and leave. But Cole wasn't done. He grabbed a spoon off the counter and dipped it into the gumbo without asking. Amara watched in disbelief as he slurped it noisily. His face twisted into a sneer. "Figures. Overseasoned. Just like you people like it." The room seemed to spin. Amara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The humiliation stung, but she bit her tongue. She knew better than to escalate the situation. "Please leave my kitchen, officer," she said firmly, her voice shaking only slightly. Cole smirked, clearly enjoying the power he wielded. "You should be thanking me for tasting this mess. If it were up to me, people like you wouldn't even be in business." The words hung in the air like a slap. Amara's pride burned, but she refused to let him see her cry. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Never let them break you, baby." As Cole turned to leave, he added, "And don't think I won't be checking back here. You better keep everything legal." He let out a dry laugh before stomping out of the kitchen. The moment he was gone, Amara let out a shaky breath. She leaned against the counter, her strength momentarily drained. But as the seconds passed, her resolve returned. She wouldn't let him ruin her day, or her future. The catering client was due to pick up their order soon. Amara knew she needed to pull herself together. She straightened her apron and carried the gumbo out to the front of the diner. Just as she placed the container on the counter, the bell above the door chimed. A man in a sharp suit walked in, his confident demeanor immediately shifting the energy in the room. "Miss Amara, I presume," he said, with a warm smile. Amara nodded, trying to hide the redness in her eyes. "I'm here to pick up the order for Mr. Williams." Amara handed him the food, her heart lifting slightly. Mr. Williams was a prominent figure in the city, a philanthropist who supported local businesses and championed equality. This order had to be perfect, and she had no doubt it was. As the man left, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Little did she know. Karma was already working its magic. Amara stood in the kitchen, still replaying Officer Cole's cruel words in her mind. Her anger simmered just below the surface, but she forced herself to focus on cleaning up. The catering order had been picked up, and now she had to prepare for the busy lunch rush. The aroma of freshly baked cornbread and seasoned shrimp wafted through the air, filling the diner with warmth that masked the lingering tension. Meanwhile, outside the diner, Cole sat in his patrol car, finishing his coffee with a self-satisfied smirk. To him, today was just another day of asserting his authority, reminding people who was in charge. He was oblivious to the storm brewing ahead. As the morning wore on, a sleek, black SUV pulled up to the diner. The driver stepped out, dressed impeccably, and opened the back door. Out stepped Mr. Williams, the prominent figure for whom the catering order had been prepared. He adjusted his tailored suit and strode toward the diner with an air of confidence. Amara was in the middle of preparing plates when the diner's front doorbell jingled again. She glanced up, her heart skipping a beat as she recognized Mr. Williams. She wiped her hands on her apron and rushed to greet him. "Mr. Williams," she said, trying to keep her tone professional despite her excitement. "What a pleasure to see you here." Mr. Williams smiled warmly. "Miss Amara, it's an honor to finally meet you in person. Your reputation as a chef precedes you, and after tasting your gumbo earlier, I just had to come and thank you personally." The entire diner went silent. The regular customers whispered among themselves, stealing glances at the man they all recognized from television and newspapers. Amara's cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and disbelief. She had worked tirelessly to build her small business, but she never imagined it would earn her recognition from someone like Mr. Williams. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It means the world to me." As Mr. Williams spoke with Amara, Cole entered the diner. He glanced around, his arrogant demeanor still intact, until his eyes landed on Mr. Williams. His smug expression faltered for a split second, but he quickly composed himself and approached. "Good morning, Mr. Williams," Cole said, his tone dripping with forced politeness. "What brings you to this part of town?" Mr. Williams turned slowly, his sharp gaze settling on Cole. "Good morning, officer," he said evenly. "I'm here to meet the chef who prepared the gumbo for my event this evening. Miss Amara is exceptionally talented." Cole's jaw tightened, but he plastered on a fake smile. "Well, I hope everything is up to your standards." "It certainly is," Mr. Williams replied, his voice firm. "And I'd appreciate it if you treated her with the respect she deserves." Amara's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The same man who had dismissed her as unimportant was now being put in his place by one of the city's most influential figures. "I don't know what you mean," Cole said, his tone defensive. "I was just doing my job." Mr. Williams raised an eyebrow. "Your job, Officer Cole, is to serve and protect this community, not to intimidate its members. I trust there won't be any further issues." Cole's face turned red, and he mumbled something under his breath before retreating to the far side of the diner. The other customers, sensing the tension, tried to hide their smirks. Amara felt a surge of gratitude as Mr. Williams turned back to her. "Miss Amara, I'll be recommending your services to many others. Your food isn't just delicious, it's a testament to your hard work and talent." Tears welled in Amara's eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Williams. That means so much to me." Before he left, Mr. Williams handed her his card. "Call my office next week. I'd like to discuss a partnership that could expand your business." As Mr. Williams exited the diner, the room erupted into applause. Customers who had witnessed the entire exchange cheered for Amara, their admiration clear. For the first time that day, Amara felt a sense of triumph. She had endured Cole's humiliation, but fate had turned the tables. Cole, now sulking in the corner, was a stark contrast to the powerful man who had just left. It was a moment Amara would never forget. Cole sat silently in the corner of the diner, stewing in his embarrassment. He'd always been able to get away with his arrogance and authority unchecked, but today felt different. The presence of someone like Mr. Williams, a man he couldn't intimidate, was a reality check he hadn't anticipated. He picked at the remnants of his coffee cup, his hands trembling with a mix of anger and shame. Meanwhile, Amara, though still stunned by Mr. Williams's offer, resumed her work. Her hands moved swiftly as she plated orders for her customers, the adrenaline of the moment pushing her through the morning rush. The diner buzzed with a newfound energy, regulars smiling at her and offering quiet words of support. As the lunch crowd filtered out, Amara had a rare moment to catch her breath. She sat down at a small table near the kitchen, her mind replaying the events of the day. The contrast between Cole's cruelty and Mr. Williams's kindness was stark, and it left her with a mix of emotions. She was grateful for the recognition, but still shaken by the earlier humiliation. "Amara!" one of the regulars called out, interrupting her thoughts. It was Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who frequented the diner every week. "You did us proud today." Amara smiled softly, her gratitude evident. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. I couldn't have done it without all of you." Before Amara could respond further, the doorbell jingled again. She looked up, half expecting another round of customers. But instead, two young men in military uniforms walked in. They scanned the diner, and their faces lit up when they saw her. "Miss Amara," one of them said, his voice filled with excitement. "We heard Mr. Williams was here earlier. Is it true?" Amara chuckled. "It's true. What brings you two in today?" The other soldier, his uniform neat and his demeanor calm, stepped forward. "We just wanted to thank you again for the food you sent to the base last month. Everyone couldn't stop talking about how good it was." Their gratitude warmed Amara's heart. She had always believed in the power of food to bring people together, and moments like this reminded her why she poured so much of herself into her work. As the soldiers chatted with Amara, Cole couldn't help but watch from the corner. His scowl deepened as he overheard their words of praise. These were the kinds of people he claimed to respect, members of the armed forces, and yet they were here, showing admiration for someone he had tried to belittle. The contradiction gnawed at him, though he tried to shake it off. The soldiers ordered plates of Amara's famous fried chicken and greens, chatting with her while they waited. Their presence added to the growing sense of camaraderie in the diner. Customers who had lingered after lunch joined in the conversation, sharing stories about Amara's cooking and her impact on the community. Cole finally stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The sound drew everyone's attention, and the room fell silent. He hesitated, his usual bravado slipping as he realized all eyes were on him. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Miss Amara," he began, his voice stiff, "I owe you an apology." Amara blinked, stunned into silence. She hadn't expected this, especially not from Cole. I didn't treat you fairly earlier," he continued, his words halting and uneven. "It was wrong of me." The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone waited to see how Amara would respond. She stood slowly, wiping her hands on her apron, and faced him directly. "Thank you for saying that, Officer Cole," she said, her tone measured. "But words alone aren't enough. Actions matter." Her words hung in the air, a challenge that Cole couldn't ignore. He nodded stiffly, muttering another apology before leaving the diner. As the door closed behind him, the room erupted into quiet applause. Amara sat back down, her legs trembling slightly. The day had been an emotional whirlwind, but she felt stronger for it. The respect and support of her community had carried her through, and the thought of Mr. Williams's offer filled her with hope for the future. Amara stood quietly for a moment, processing what had just happened. The applause in the diner slowly died down, and the regular hum of conversation resumed. The soldiers who had been praising her earlier gave her one last, encouraging smile before returning to their meal. For Amara, the day had taken a turn she never could have predicted. The humiliation from Cole's earlier behavior had weighed her down, but the respect she had received from her community and the surprising apology from Cole sparked a feeling of resilience. After tidying up her workspace, Amara stepped into the kitchen for a moment of solitude. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes and letting out a long breath. Her thoughts drifted to Mr. Williams's words. The idea of cooking for his organization was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but doubt crept in. What if I'm not good enough? She thought. What if this is just a dream I'm not ready to chase? She didn't have long to dwell on these thoughts. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. Pulling it out, she saw a message from her younger sister, Clara. Clara. I saw the video. Amara, you're trending on social media. People are calling you a hero. Amara frowned in confusion. Video? Hero? What was Clara talking about? Before she could respond, another customer walked into the diner holding up their phone. Amara, you've got to see this, they exclaimed, waving her over. The customer turned the screen toward her, revealing a video of the incident with Cole. It had been recorded by another patron and uploaded to social media just hours ago. The video showed Cole's initial arrogance, his condescending remarks, and his attempt to belittle Amara. But it also captured the moment Mr. Williams stood up for her, as well as the collective support from the other customers. In just a short time, the video had racked up thousands of views and comments, with people praising Amara for her composure and strength. Amara's cheeks flushed. I didn't even know someone was recording, she murmured, feeling a mix of embarrassment and pride. The customer grinned. Well, the world knows now. You're inspiring people. As word spread, more customers arrived at the diner. Some were regulars who wanted to show their support, while others were newcomers who had seen the video online and wanted to meet Amara in person. The diner quickly became busier than it had been in months. The tables filling up with excited patrons eager to try Amara's cooking and share their admiration. Throughout the lunch rush, Amara worked tirelessly in the kitchen, preparing plate after plate of her signature dishes. The atmosphere in the diner was electric, with conversations buzzing and laughter echoing through the room. Several customers approached Amara during breaks to thank her for standing up to Cole, sharing their own stories of facing discrimination and how her resilience had inspired them. Meanwhile, Cole sat in his squad car outside the diner, his mind swirling with conflicting emotions. He had seen the video as well. Watching himself act so arrogantly had been like looking into a mirror that reflected his worst qualities. He couldn't escape the fact that he had been wrong, terribly wrong. But what haunted him most wasn't the embarrassment or public backlash. It was the realization that he had judged someone like Amara, someone who had clearly earned the respect and love of her community without knowing a single thing about her. Cole sighed and leaned back in his seat. His radio crackled with routine updates, but he barely paid attention. He was too consumed by the thought that maybe it was time to change. But change wasn't easy for someone like Cole. He had built his life around authority and control, and admitting fault felt like tearing down a wall he'd spent years constructing. Inside the diner, Amara finally had a moment to catch her breath. She wiped her hands on her apron and took a sip of water, glancing at the growing crowd of supportive faces. A part of her felt overwhelmed, but another part felt deeply grateful. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. Not just as a chef, but as a person. Just as she was about to head back into the kitchen, Mr. Williams returned. His commanding presence silenced the room for a moment, and all eyes turned to him. He approached Amara with a warm smile, holding a large envelope in his hand. "Amara," he said, his voice kind but firm, "I meant what I said earlier. You have a rare gift, and the world deserves to see it. I want you to take this." Amara hesitated as he handed her the envelope. Opening it, she found a formal letter of invitation to join his organization's culinary team, as well as details about an upcoming gala where she would have the opportunity to showcase her cooking to some of the most influential people in the industry. Her breath caught. "Mr. Williams, I don't know what to say." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Say yes, Amara. You've already proven you're ready. This is your moment." Tears welled up in Amara's eyes as she clutched the envelope to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll make you proud." The room erupted into applause, the patrons cheering and clapping for Amara. Even the soldiers from earlier stood and saluted her, their admiration evident. Amara's heart swelled with gratitude, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in her own potential. Outside, Cole watched through the diner's large front window. He saw the joy and support surrounding Amara, and for a moment, he felt like an outsider looking in on a world he didn't understand. His hand hovered over the car door handle, but he couldn't bring himself to step inside. Instead, he drove away, his thoughts heavy. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't keep ignoring the growing sense of regret gnawing at him. As the day turned to evening, Amara closed the diner, her heart full. She sat alone at one of the tables, the envelope from Mr. Williams still in her hands. She thought about her journey, the struggles, the discrimination, and the hard work that had brought her here. And she thought about the people who had supported her, from her regular customers to strangers online who had been moved by her story. She pulled out her phone and opened the video that had gone viral. Scrolling through the comments, she saw messages of encouragement and gratitude. One comment in particular caught her eye. "Amara, you're an inspiration. Thank you for standing up for yourself and showing us all what dignity looks like." Amara smiled softly. She didn't feel like a hero, but she was glad her story had resonated with others. As she prepared to lock up for the night, she made a silent promise to herself to embrace this new opportunity with all her heart, and to continue being a source of hope and strength for her community. Amara's life began to change rapidly after that eventful day. The days following her encounter with Officer Cole were filled with a mix of excitement, nervousness, and hard work. The video of the incident had continued to gain traction online, amassing millions of views. People from all over the country reached out to share their support and their own experiences with injustice. Amara felt overwhelmed, but deeply moved by the outpouring of love and solidarity. With the gala, hosted by Mr. Williams just weeks away, Amara threw herself into preparing for the opportunity of a lifetime. She spent every spare moment perfecting her recipes, testing new flavors, and ensuring that every dish she planned to serve would leave a lasting impression. Despite the whirlwind of activity, she remained grounded, drawing strength from her community and the people who had stood by her. One evening, as Amara worked late in the diner's kitchen, the bell over the front door jingled softly. She looked up, expecting to see a regular customer, but instead found Officer Cole standing awkwardly near the counter. His uniform was neat, but his expression was far from confident. Amara's heart skipped a beat. Memories of his cruel words and actions flashed through her mind, but she forced herself to remain calm. Wiping her hands on her apron, she walked out of the kitchen, her posture straight and her gaze steady. "Officer Cole, she said, her voice neutral. What brings you here? Cole hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor for a moment before meeting hers. I came to apologize, he said quietly. I know my behavior was unacceptable, and I've been thinking a lot about what happened that day. Amara crossed her arms, unsure of how to respond. The anger and humiliation she had felt were still fresh, but she could also see the sincerity in his eyes. Why now? She asked, her tone cautious. Why are you apologizing now, after everything? Cole sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. Because I was wrong. Watching that video, seeing how I treated you, it made me realize how much I've let my own biases cloud my judgment. I can't undo what I did, but I want to make things right. Amara studied him carefully, her emotions a mix of skepticism and a faint glimmer of hope. She had never expected an apology from Cole, and part of her wondered if he truly meant it, or if it was simply an attempt to save face after the backlash. But the vulnerability in his voice suggested he was being genuine. You hurt me, she said honestly. Not just with your words, but with the way you looked at me. I didn't deserve to be here. Do you know how many people feel that way every day? Cole nodded, his shoulders slumping slightly. I know, and I know I've been part of the problem. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say this. I needed to tell you, I'm sorry. For a moment, the two stood in silence. Amara could feel the weight of his words, and while she wasn't sure she was ready to forgive, she appreciated the effort he was making. Thank you for saying that, she said finally. It doesn't erase what happened, but it's a start. Cole nodded, relief flickering across his face. If there's anything I can do to help, anything at all, please let me know. Amara didn't respond immediately, but she knew the journey toward understanding and change was a long one. Just keep learning, she said, and treat people with the respect they deserve. After Cole left, Amara returned to the kitchen, her mind racing. She had always believed in second chances, but forgiving someone who had caused her so much pain was no small task. Still, she resolved to focus on what lay ahead, the gala, and the opportunity to share her talent with the world. The night of the gala arrived sooner than Amara expected. Dressed in a simple but elegant gown, she stood nervously in the grand hall, surrounded by some of the most influential figures in the culinary world. The air buzzed with anticipation as guests mingled, sipping champagne and admiring the lavish decorations. Amara's station was set up near the center of the room, where she would prepare her dishes live for the guests. As the event began, she took a deep breath and focused on her craft, pouring all her passion and creativity into every plate. One by one, guests approached her station, their expressions lighting up as they tasted her food. Compliments flowed freely, and many asked about her journey, her story. Amara shared bits and pieces, careful not to let the focus stray too far from her cooking. Toward the end of the evening, Mr. Williams approached with a small group of guests. Among them was a man in a tailored suit with an air of quiet authority. Mr. Williams introduced him as a prominent restaurant owner looking for new talent. "I've heard a lot about you, Amara," the man said, extending a hand. "Your food speaks for itself, and your story is inspiring. I'd like to offer you a position as the head chef at one of my establishments." Amara's breath caught. The offer was beyond anything she had dared to dream. She glanced at Mr. Williams, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. "I'd be honored." As the gala came to a close, Amara reflected on how far she had come. From a small diner to a grand hall filled with opportunity, her journey had been anything but easy. But through every challenge, She had found strength in herself and the people who believed in her. Amara stood in her kitchen the morning after the gala, reflecting on how far she had come. The memory of the cop's initial humiliation was still fresh, but now it felt distant, a shadow of the past compared to the bright future ahead. Her phone buzzed with messages from guests praising her food and requesting her services for future events. One message, however, stood out: a heartfelt apology from Officer Miller. He admitted that his actions were rooted in ignorance and prejudice, acknowledging how Amara's strength and talent had forced him to confront his own biases. Amara didn't reply immediately. Instead, she took a moment to consider how this journey wasn't just about personal success, but about breaking barriers and inspiring others. As the weeks passed, Amara's catering business flourished. Media outlets covered her story, highlighting her resilience and determination. She was invited to speak at events and workshops, sharing her experience to motivate others facing similar challenges. The same community that once turned away from her now rallied behind her, supporting her every step of the way. One day, Amara found herself back at the police precinct, this time as a guest speaker. She stood in front of the officers, including Miller, to talk about the power of understanding and the importance of treating everyone with respect. Miller approached her afterward, expressing his gratitude for her forgiveness and the chance to change. Amara realized her journey had come full circle. What began as an act of humiliation had transformed into a powerful story of redemption and hope, not just for her, but for everyone involved. Amara's story reminds us all of the power of resilience and kindness in the face of adversity. Her journey from being humiliated to becoming a celebrated chef is a testament to how we can rise above challenges and inspire change in others. But what do you think? If you were in Amara's shoes, would you have forgiven Officer Miller? Or would you have walked away without looking back? Let's talk about it in the comments. Share your thoughts on the importance of second chances and how we can all work toward building a more understanding and inclusive world. Don't forget to share and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. Together, we can spread messages of hope and transformation to inspire others. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts below.